Thank you so much for inviting me here to be a part of this important gathering. I was a student at the Divinity School on the other side of campus. They kept us over there for a reason. I was never allowed here on this campus for some reason. I don't think prayer and capitalism really mix together, but it's so nice here. To begin with, my name is Lama Owens. I use he, him pronouns. And I live and teach on and am from the ancestral lands of the Creek, Cherokee, and Muskogee people on a land that we call Atlanta, Georgia now. And I bring you greetings and blessings from the spirit of that land and the ancestors and guardians of that land to this land, the ancestral lands of the Wampanoag, Massachusetts, Nipmuc people, and many other tribes and communities. I also bring you blessings from my ancestors who support me and walk with me in everything that I do, whose love as well as rage created the conditions for me to be here to not only survive, but to thrive, in this body, in this land, and to commit and further engage in the work of liberation, which is my primary project in life, is to get free through love. I wrote a book called Love and Rage, where I explored the relationships between love and rage, much like this conference, which I think is called Rage and Love, maybe for copyright reasons, I don't know, maybe. Maybe it was fear that I would somehow assimilate this into my resume, but it's close enough, it already has been assimilated. And I wrote that book because this thing happened a couple of years ago that I think a couple of people noticed. There was this election. This guy got elected. I don't want to go into it, it's really painful. But a lot of people were pissed. Some of you were pissed. And you just can't, people kept coming to me and asking me, what are we going to do? I'm so pissed off. And I would say, why are you asking me? I don't want to talk about this. But over time, the questions kept coming, and I saw that as a sign for me to actually explore something that I think most people didn't really know were in a relationship, which was love and rage, right? But a lot of people talking about love and a lot of people talking about freedom, which is where we go in between love and rage. I think when people talk about these words, I think people are talking about very different things, right? And so just to begin with, when I talk about love, I'm not talking about a feeling. Like, I'm not talking about a feeling of caring for someone. I'm talking about a fundamental belief that everyone deserves a right to be happy, safe, and to have access to all the resources that they need to be well, period. And I don't care who you are, right? And I don't have to like you to love you. And that's where some of you are getting confused at with this word. Like, I don't have to like you, right, for me to want you to be safe and happy and resourced, right? If I don't like you, it just means I'm not gonna be your BFF. I'm not gonna, we're not gonna be texting, sending TikTok videos back and forth to one another. We're not gonna go out hanging at the bar. We're not gonna be doing any of that. But I am committing to not getting in the way of what you need to be safe. Because maybe some of the violence that I perceive coming from you comes from the fact that you're under-resourced. Or maybe you never got the resources you needed to begin with in your life. And so I want to be an agent that helps you to be resourced because I'm interested in the reduction of violence and harm in the world, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in accountability. It doesn't mean that I'm not interested in boundaries, because boundaries and accountability come from love. They're not acts of punishment or retribution. I don't engage in these practices because I want you to hurt as much as I've been hurt. I want you to be free, right? And that's the primary ethic that I think we have to return to, is that everyone needs to be free from this, including ourselves. That's where love comes from, right? Again, I don't have to like you. There are a lot of people that I don't like, right? But I try to love everyone, right? So when I talk about freedom, right, and I am informed through my tradition of contemplative practice, which is meditation and mindfulness, as well as the spiritual paths that I've trained in, which have been a few, but primarily Buddhism. It's been one of my primary spiritual paths. So when I talk about freedom, I'm talking about two things. First, social freedom, right? Again, that we're free from the causes and conditions that create harm and suffering for individuals and communities, right? That everyone has access to the resources that they need to be well, that we get to determine the course of our bodies, and we get to determine the course of our communities as long, right, as these decisions do not create further harm and violence, right? And that is a discussion that has to be had in community, right? When do my actions create harm for others, and what is harm, right? I think I mention this because, we're confused about being unsafe and being uncomfortable, right? And it's conflated. And I think that's giving rise to a lot of violence right now. I think a lot of people are just uncomfortable, right? Because they've been allowed to take up a lot of space, And now we're calling that space out as something that needs to be disrupted, right? And reduced. And then people are seeing that as an act of harm against them, right? And then if you feel unsafe, then you're going to react to that experience of being unsafe probably through violence, right? Protecting yourself, protecting your loved ones, and so forth, right? So that's like the first kind of freedom. But ultimate freedom, for me, from my traditions, means that I transcend dualities and binaries, right? I return to this basic fundamental expression of what some may call God, but in my experience and my practice, I say I am returning back to this fundamental expression of emptiness, space, fluidity, right? Which for me is also an expression of love, right? I am remembering who I am, right? And so mainstream mindfulness, for instance, comes from a tradition in Buddhism called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. The root name is the Satipatthana, right? So from the Satipatthana to mainstream mindfulness, we've missed something really important, which is the value and the ethic of freedom, right? Mainstream mindfulness is about assimilation, comfort, right? But the root of Buddhist-based mindfulness is about getting free, right? It's about reducing violence, right? It's about deeply embodying love, which will actually disrupt and abolish systems that perpetuate harm, right? So why would we teach a mainstream mindfulness that's actually about disrupting the systems that many people benefit from, including all of us in this room, quite honestly, right? So the root of the Satipatthana is not just meditating to get free, but the root of the Satipatthana is remembering. The Satipatthana means to remember who you are. So we are not the chaos, but that's what we've begun to self-identify with, right? With the violence, with the systems like patriarchy, white supremacy, ableism, and so forth, right? We think that's who we are, but in the root practice of the Satipatthana, we begin to divest from those self-identifications with systems of harm and to reinvest in who we really are, which is an embodiment and an expression of love, and that love is an expression of space, fluidity, potential, right? But to give up, right, to start divesting from these systems and to start reinvesting in who we are means that we have to deal with the brokenheartedness, right? The deep mourning and grief that has to be acknowledged because we are giving up something that we thought we were, right? And that's the struggle right now, right? This is a moment of apocalypse, right? And apocalypse doesn't mean the end of anything. That's a misunderstanding. You're talking about Armageddon. I'm not dealing with Armageddon. I don't have, training in that, but I do have training. I don't have that degree from here. But I am really familiar with apocalypse. Apocalypse means truth-telling. It means unveiling. But when someone tells you the truth about something you don't want to deal with, it's going to feel violent because you don't want to deal with it. And because you don't want to deal with it, you're going to weaponize yourself, right? And begin to create harm and protect yourself, right? So you're doing that, but so is the collective. So it makes it harder for us to be in the world right now because the systems that we no longer need are actually being disrupted and moving towards abolishment. And that feels like dying, right? When you self-identify with something, when that thing begins to be disrupted, it feels like you are being disrupted. In many ways, we can talk about white supremacy. In this case, we're some of you are so self-identified, I was gonna say all of you, some of us are so self-identified with white supremacy, right? That to disrupt white supremacy feels like an actual death. And most people aren't willing to die. And that is the dilemma. The same with patriarchy, a deep investment in the system of hierarchy, and privilege to disrupt patriarchy. And if you're self-identified with the system of patriarchy, then it's going to feel like death, right? And of course, in patriarchy, when privileges are given to certain people, cisgender men, right, who already have this power, then that weaponizing of this feeling of harm is going to create a lot of destruction, right? A lot of harm. So in this case, are you willing to die to get free? Is really the point of this. Not a physical death, but this death of who you think you are. I mean, this is, I think, the root of DEI work. And I'm going to get to rage in a second, but this is the point here. Like, we all do good work and we all talk a good game, and many of us get paid really well, looking at the institutions that are represented here. Hallelujah. But, like, what are you actually willing to do to transition this world, to transition your communities into this experience of freedom? What are you still holding on to? And some of us say, why do I have to be the one to sacrifice? Well, why not? Why not me? It's a hard price. But again, a lot of folks who are talking about freedom aren't really talking about getting free. You're talking about getting comfortable and getting happy. You're talking about reforming institutions, right? So you can maintain some level of comfort and privilege. Like, why should you have to be uncomfortable, right? That's not really the practice of my ancestors, right? And the people that I study, particularly the anti-slave abolitionists, where I root my work in spiritual abolition. And, right, I think about Harriet Tubman, for instance, who was like, listen, you get two choices, get free or not. And you need to die trying to get free if you're not free, right? How do we bring that ethic back into our own work and say, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to sacrifice, right? How am I willing to let my heart break, and then letting my heart break, allow myself to be held by all the beings around me who love me? So I can begin to transition into an understanding of myself that is essentially free, fluid, full of potential, divine, sacred, instead of always choosing this material form, right, that's so self-identified with a sense of ego attached to power and hierarchy and comfort, and validation and being seen, right? So then I get into anger, right? And for me, anger is the bodyguard of our hurt. When people say I'm angry, what I hear them saying is that they've been hurt. And they're trying to figure out how to take care of themselves. Anger is a secondary emotion, right? And I think that's where we stop at. We think anger is the main show. But in fact, anger is pointing us back to the hurt. Many of us will never get to the hurt because the energy of anger is so intense. And we think we overvalue anger, right? We think anger has much more value and data than we realize, right? And I know, Mother Audrey, talked about, the data of anger. Anger is full of data and power, and it is. But it's not how we get things done, right? It's energy, right? But we get things done because we begin to name the hurt, and the hurt calls in the experience of deep loving. And it's from this experience of love, the love that's holding my hurt, that I begin to engage with the world in a way that's transformational and generative, right? Instead of in a way that feels destructive and out of control and reactive, right? When I put anger and love together and rage and love together, what I was actually saying is that it is my love that holds the experience of anger. Love cares for everything, including my deep hurt, right? If we forget all of that, then we get lost in this tension, right? So we get hurt, the anger arises, and we're trying to figure out how to take care of ourselves, and we don't know how to. So there's a tension between being hurt and the anger that we get wrapped up in, and then that's when we start reacting to things and practicing anger, practicing rage, right? And again, I am not angry, I am not hurt. These are experiences, really, and this is where we can begin to experience liberation in our minds and our bodies when we understand that these are experiences. This isn't who I am. I am not angry. If I'm angry, then how can I actually transcend something that I am? Right? These are experiences because you're not always angry. Right? And that's actually not the nature of who you are. But it's something that is happening for many of us in the moment, as well as the hurt, but there are many things that are happening in the moment, including our joy. Right? So anger sometimes means that we forget our joy, but we have to reconnect to the joy in the same way we reconnect to the love, because these are energies that hold the destructive power that anger can become. And then if we are holding these experiences, then we have the agency to channel these energies into creating, right? Into supporting, into healing, into reestablishing, into peace. Not just into reactivity, thinking that we're going to weaponize all of this to get back at everyone who's hurt us, right? And this is going to require a personal change, individual change that many people aren't ready for, right? You know, we always, I think sometimes we overemphasize collective change because we don't want to deal with the individual work that we need to do, right? But we'll never move forward until some of us start actually investing in an interpersonal change in our lives and to bring that work into collective relationships, right? So this is like the relationship between love and rage for me. I am someone who experiences a lot of anger. I am someone who experiences a lot of hurt, but I am being held by love, and that love is a deep joy that keeps me moving in the world, that keeps me dancing and singing and laughing, right? The world is in a lot of transition and pain, but I don't have to get swallowed by that pain. I can hold that. I can hold the transition of my communities. I can hold interpersonal and transhistorical traumas, right, that have been passed to me. But I have to be willing to commit to love, commit to the heartbreak, and commit to the mourning, and to open to the love and joy, right? And then anger is there, and we can tune in and out of anger, you know, as a source of energy, but that energy is informed and held by love. And if you can do that, then you will begin to see a different kind of change in the world, right? Thank you.